Hello, hello. This is Fernando here. I'm going to start our weekly book discussion. We are going over book number 11 of our weekly book discussion, the 52 book challenge. And today's book is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Now, this book was longer than all the other books that we've read so far. So yeah, it was a longer book. It was a great book. I actually had it in my library, and this is the second time around that I'm reading this. But obviously, everything that I'm reading in this challenge is a much different experience, because I'm not just reading it. I'm taking notes. I'm recording videos about it. So it's more like a study. I'm studying these books a little bit more. It's not just I'm reading it. So it's a great experience this time around when I'm reading. So Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Chris Voss is a former FBI hostage negotiator. He's pretty good at what he did in terms of FBI hostage negotiation. And this book, he goes into a lot of details and shares his experience, negotiating in hostage situations in different parts of the world. And it was very, I think, extensive. The examples that he provided were very good. I'm not going to go over the whole book because, like I said, the book is pretty. It was long. It's only 10 chapters, but it was a lot of reading. But I'm going to focus on a couple of things. I'm going to go over my notes, but I'm going to focus on a couple of things, and in particular, one method or one strategy that he talked about that's called the Ackerman Model. Now, I'll talk about that in a few moments, but it has to do with negotiation. It's a strategy of negotiation. Now, what does this have to do with you, right? A hostage negotiator, right? Well, the thing is that it's about negotiations and the behavior of influencing. So everything that he shared in this book, it applies to everyday situations in our lives. It doesn't matter if you're in business or just in your personal life, just talking to people. If you're buying something as a consumer, you're buying a car, you're buying, a certain item. There's a element of negotiation that takes place. And so everything that he talks about, I think, is very, very helpful. And if you apply it in your lives. So that's the approach that I took when I'm going over this book, and I think that you'll enjoy it as well. And one of the key things that I took away from this book is that he talks about having open-ended or making open-ended calibrated questions. So there's a big difference between just asking questions when you're negotiating, like, oh, what is this or what is that, right? Versus calibrated questions. They're more tactical. You're more tactical in the questions that you're asking. And what that does in the negotiation process is that it buys you time. So in his example, when he's talking about negotiating with a kidnapper, when he tries to talk to the kidnapper, he asks open-ended questions that are calibrated the way he says it, and it buys him time. And what happens is that it gives the other person the illusion of control. It gives the other person the illusion that they're in control without really knowing that they're being constrained by the open-ended questions that he's asking them. So he basically turns it around, and it becomes on how does the kidnapper solve your problem. So, for example, if the kidnapper is asking for like $1 million, a ransom, right? And one type of open-ended question Chris would ask is that, well, how am I gonna get that? How am I gonna get that amount, that much money, right? So instead of saying no, that's too much, he asked an open, calibrated question: is how can I get to that money? How can I come up with that money? So he asked. So you ask that question to the kidnapper, And what happens is that now the kidnapper is going to think about solving that problem for you. How are you going to come up with that money? So it kind of focuses, it redirects his attention to now solving that your problem by answering that question. And what that does is it buys time in the negotiation process, and and that's one tactical approach that he talks about actually quite often in the book. Um, and so he came into this profession. He talked about the FBI, but he's a police. He was in the police. He was a police, but then he talked about Harvard, and that Harvard back then, before he was a hostage negotiator, like there was like a lot of uh, Harvard techniques for negotiation, and they were very intellectual, and it was not that much based on experience. And when he started working, uh, there was a lot of lessons that were learned in the field. And for example, he talked about what happened in Waco, Texas, and what how they learned from mistakes that and from things that could have been done better. And they reshaped the model and how they trained people that were hostage negotiators. So one thing that is very important that he points out is that people want to be understood and people want to be listened to. So when he's going into a hostage negotiation situation, keeping that in mind, that the people want to be understood and listened to. So again, if you're thinking about in your day-to-day life and you're kind of negotiating something, it's the same thing. People want to be understood and listened to. Don't get too stuck in the numbers. You want to first understand, or the other person wants to feel understood. So you have to have what he calls tactical empathy. And again, he gets into a lot of great examples and examples, real life situations that he talks about. And he says that listening is very important. Listening is not a passive thing. It's very active to be listening. So for example, you might think that, oh, listening is just you listening to the other person talking and that's it. No, you're actually actively picking up the words and any key phrases or any information, and you're processing this, and then you're going to see what can you use from the information that the other person is saying. So it's active listening. And so one of the things that so communication is very important. He talks about how to communicate, how to listen, um, you know, how to influence, and these things. It's useful to know how to engage in conflicts without incurring damages, right? Because as you can imagine, in a hostage situation, what the damages are. And the title of the book is never split the difference, and that comes from the idea or the notion that as a hostage negotiator, it's a successful hostage negotiator basically gets every hostage out. There's no halfway. There is no half, right? Because if you have 10 hostages, you want to get 10 hostages out. It's not like, oh, let me get 2 out. That doesn't work, right? So it's never. That's where it kind of comes from. Never split the difference. It's really, you're all in. And so he gives a lot of examples. He starts talking about a bank robbery examples. He talks about one strategy called the DJ voice, and it has to do with a method of speaking that he lowers his voice. He lowers it. He calls it like a DJ sort of. That's the example he gives. So there's different points, different times in the negotiation process. Well, he might lower his voice, and that has an impact in the negotiation. So another example or strategy is called mirroring. And mirroring has to do basically that you're basically repeating what the other person is saying. You're mirroring the other person, and it's based on the concept that we fear what's different and we're drawn to what's similar. So if the other person sees that you're doing something different than them, it's going to kind of repel them or put their defenses up. Versus if they see that you are similar to him, then you're drawn to him. It kind of opens up the conversation. And the mirroring technique, I've heard this before in other places, is very helpful in conversations and talking and making sure that you resolve conflicts by mirroring the other person. Basically, you're repeating the last couple of words or the sentences that the other person is saying. You kind of mirror it and you repeat it, and that way the other person knows that you're on the same page and you're actually listening. So he goes on and talks about not getting emotional. It's very important not to get emotional when you're negotiating, because again, when you're getting emotional, a different part of your brain gets triggered, and then you're no longer being tactical, right? You're just going out and following your emotions, and that doesn't really serve you. So you don't want to be unemotional. You want to be careful of the yeses and master the nos. There's a school of thought that tends to want to make people say yes a lot and be in agreement with a lot of things that you're saying, and that's a way to guide the conversation into your final yes. However, when he's talking about this, and based on the experience that he has, when people use that technique, the people that are saying yes could be reluctant at the end because they might say a yes, but they don't really want that yes, or they have a change of heart at the end because they said yes at the first. So instead, he wants to start with a no, because when you give permission to the other person to say no, it gives them the illusion that they're in control. So again, going back to what we said at the beginning, when you feel in control, then your guard is not up because you're in control and you're more open to the dialogue, to hear the proposal, etc. Right? So you want to be open to a no, and no doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. No could mean not yet, not ready, but then the conversation starts from the no, and that's a more a better approach. So you got to train yourself to hear no as something other than rejection. So that's something that I said. So um, let's see what else. Yeah, he goes into a lot of examples. He talks about some situation in the Philippines. He also talks about a technique called the "that's right" technique. When you get the other person to say "that's right," not that you're right, but that's right. Basically, what's happening when you're describing the situation or the feeling or the emotion, and if the other person says that's right, that's a plus, because again, it opens up the dialogue because you're on the same page. So that it goes on. I'm gonna go into the technique that I wanted to explain, because I think that's one of the key takeaways that I took from the book, and it's actually at the very end. One thing before I get into that, I see how I'm looking at my notes: loss or aversion. He talks about anchoring their emotions. Let the other guy go first. Establish a range. Uh, Pivot to non-moment. Okay, yeah. So let me talk to you about the one model that he talked about at the end. I think it was in chapter 9. It's a bargaining strategy method that's called Ackerman Model. So the Ackerman Model is an offer and counter offer method. So, this applies when you're buying something, but it also applies when you're selling something. Okay. So it's on either end. So it's an offer counter offer. And the way it works is, if you are, let's say you're going to buy something, let's say a car, for example. Okay. And you go to a dealer and you're going to buy a car. So let's say the car is worth, or the car price is $35,000. Okay. Or $40,000 or $35,000. Let's say $35,000. what the strategy goes like this. Step is about 6 steps. The first step is you set yourself a goal of how much you want to pay for that car. Okay. Yeah, the price is 35. That's the sticker price. But you want to have a goal of what is it that you want before going into the negotiation. You want to have that in mind. What is the what is your price, right? What is it that your goal is, what your target goal is? And then you want to have have a couple of options that you're going to have as offers, and you have a 65%. Well, actually, before I get it, the offer that you want that you're able to give for the whatever you're buying, you take 65% of that, and that is where you're going to start the negotiation. And I have a graphic here. I'm going to explain here. So this is what it is. Basically, you have a target goal, and then you have the amount is 65%, 85%, 95%, and 100% of that goal. Okay. So you want to break down the numbers and have them prepared in your negotiation. And so basically, if let's say, for example, if you have a car and I said 35,000, and I'm going to say, okay, let me say, so my target goal is going to be $30,000. Okay. So when I'm going into negotiation, I know that it's 35,000, but my negotiation is I'm going to start at 65%. So I'm going to lowball and start at a very low price. And that's where I'm going to start the negotiation. So my first offer is 65% of my target goal. So as you can see here, from 30,000, that's 10,500. It's very low, right? Ridiculous amount of low. What that does is it sets the baseline in your negotiation. And the other person is obviously going to say, you're crazy, or that, that's not possible. And then they're going to come up with, no, it's 35. So what you're going to do is there might be a point where you go back and forth, but if the other person says, obviously they're going to say, no, this is not okay, but you never know. It's possible, that the price from 35,000 will go much lower, right? They'll say, no, okay, I'll leave it to you at 34 or something like that, right? Then your second offer is going to be the 85%, which is much higher and much closer to the amount that they're asking for, right? So 85% is still below your target. So the 85% is 25,500. So then at that point, you're gonna, you'll say this is the amount that I can come up with, and that's pretty much all I have. And then the other person is gonna say, no, that's still not too much. That's not if it's not good, they're gonna try to raise it more, right? They're gonna say, no, that's not enough. They'll say maybe 33, right? And you may say the next number that you can say is 95%, the 95% from your target goal, and that's 28.5. And then that's it. I can't do any more. That's about as much as I can do. And you have to be willing to walk away. That's one of the key things. You have to be willing to walk away. This is how much you can do, and then you set then you're quiet. You leave it on the other person to decide. Then that if they still don't accept that, then the other offer that you can make is, well, you know what? You can say, okay, 100% of my target, but you don't just say 30,000 because 30,000 is your final, right? But now you're getting to 30,000. You make it an odd number. You'd make it very close, like 29,987, because that makes it like that's all you really have. Like you really calculated this, and this is all the money that you have. And then on the bonus, if it's still, you still can put something out, you'll say, okay, in addition to that, maybe I can do some, you offer something that is non-monetary in value, that is not worth much to them, but it's something that you're willing to offer. So then again, that adds more of a psychological thing, where, you're basically giving everything you have. So you have to use a lot of empathy to say different ways of saying no, before you're increasing to your next offer. And then when you're calculating that final amount, you make it a non-round number. something odd, and that's it. You do the final non-monetary amount, non-monetary item, and that is called the Ackerman model. So that's very successful. He pointed out in negotiations. This is an example with like a dollar amount, but this is also something that could be applied in a lot of different types of negotiations. You basically have your target goal, then you calculate how much you want to offer first, and then you start raising. But if you don't have these numbers, then you can very easily be sidetracked and not get the deal that you want. So I like this a lot. I think this is, it just gives you a framework when you're negotiating. Negotiations and prices, sometimes people, most of the times it's like a concept of, no, let's split it in the middle, or let's compromise, that's kind of an idea. Oh no, this is high, this is low, let's make it split in the middle. This is when he gets into never split the difference, right? This is like a bargaining technique that he talks about. So I thought that was interesting. He has a lot of other examples. This is just one of them. And I think that if you really study this, apply it in buying situations and selling situations, right? It's definitely good to have some type of strategy and not just to feel, not just an emotional, because then you're going to be making emotional decision, and that is not in your favor, right? Like we said at the beginning, don't use your emotions too much. You got to be more tactical. So this book is definitely a lot of strategies. He talked about the Black Swan. He has a company called the Black Swan Group. One strategy is when in your active listening, you can pick up the aha moment, or the like a key giveaway that will turn the negotiation in your favor, and that's something like he calls the Black Swan. So lastly, I think there's so many golden nuggets here. The Pinocchio effect. He talks about the Pinocchio effect. When somebody's lying, they tend to use more words than usual, because they are trying harder to justify their lie. So they use additional words, more complicated sentences, so more complex sentences. So there's a lot of psychology and strategies behind that. So again, this is a hostage negotiator talking, right? So that's all that I really wanted to go over today. I mean, there's a lot of other good nuggets in this book. It's a great book to look at. It's definitely one of the longer ones. It's not that long. I mean, compared to many books, but it's the longer one that from the series that we've been reading. Never split the difference. So next week we will be going on book number 12, and next book is going to be Traction. Get a Grip on Your Business. Very good book. This is a longer book as well. I actually have that, and it's a great book for business. Traction. So we're going to get into that book next week. All right, my friends, that's all for today. Have a good evening, and I'll see you on the other video.